So leadership is a relationship, is a heart relationship, fundamentally and definitionally. I think the first fundamental principle underlying leadership is that it's a relationship, and it's the quality of that relationship that determines the level of engagement that people will have. And the more leaders encourage others and recognize high performance, the higher the levels of engagement will be.
Welcome to Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today's episode is all about the heart of leadership, quite literally. We're diving into the principle of encouraging the heart and why it's such a crucial part of great leadership. To help us unpack this concept, I'm honored to have Jim Kouzes, one of the most influential leadership experts of our time, join us. Jim, along with his co-author, Barry Posner, has authored multiple best-selling leadership books, including The Leadership Challenge, which has been a cornerstone for leaders around the world, as well as this book, Encouraging the Heart, which is actually the basis for today's conversation. His work has shaped how we think about inspiring and empowering others. Jim, welcome to Science of Leadership, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure.
Okay, from the outset here, let's define our topic. For those who might not be familiar with this idea, what does it mean to encourage the heart when we're talking about leadership?
Well, encouraging the heart is one of the 5 practices of exemplary leadership that we uncovered when we did our research on exemplary leadership back in the mid 1980s. Barry and I asked people to tell us a personal best leadership experience, and after collecting thousands of cases and developing an assessment tool to look at the behaviors associated with that, their personal best leadership experiences, we identified 5, and those 5 are model the way, inspire a shared vision, enable others to act, challenge the process, and encourage the heart. Encourage the heart then became the emphasis of one of our books that we wrote subsequent to that first edition of Leadership Challenge titled Encourage the Heart. And essentially, that practice is about 2 things fundamentally: recognizing individuals for their contributions to the values and the vision of the organization, and then celebrating together, celebrating those successes together as a group. So it's about individually doing something as a leader and also doing something together collectively as a community.
Thanks for defining that for us, because I'm a firm believer that we got to know what we're talking about if we're going to talk about it in a meaningful way. So that's great. And then for framing that out, I mean, I think it's such a powerful leadership concept of encouraging people both individually and collectively, as you say. Can you share a story for us of a leader, you can think of who really embodied this principle?
Well, Tom, the story we open Encouraging the Heart with, both the first edition and now a new edition that will be coming out mid 2025, May of 2025, is a story from Tom Malone. It's my favorite Encouraging the Heart story because it embodies everything that one can do as a leader to exemplify that practice. So, if I may, I'll give you an abbreviated version.
Sure.
The scene of this is a setting is a shop floor, a mid-sized manufacturing company in Northern California. Tom is on the shop floor, and his team is gathered around him, those who work in the shop, and Tom is the president of this mid-sized manufacturing company, calls them together for a weekly award. Uh, but he says at the beginning, we've got a new award today. He says, this month we have the freezer award. And then he looks at the group and says, anybody know who won this? Anybody know who won this award? And somebody in the group shouts, Kelly. And there's Tom shouts, okay, Kelly, come on up. Come on, there's something in the freezer, Kelly. Go look in the freezer. So Kelly goes over to the freezer, opens the freezer door, and pulls out a metal rod and a cylinder. And there's an envelope attached to it. And Tom says, come on out, come on over up front here, Kelly. And Kelly comes to the front. Tom's laughing, and everyone else joins in the laughter and the joy of Kelly, who's walking up with this metal rod and cylinder in his hand up to the front to stand with Tom. And Tom opens the envelope and he hands it to Kelly. And inside is a recognition, small check for what he did. But then Tom says, "Oh," grabs that part away from Kelly and says, "Oh, that's cold." And looks at the part and says, "Remember this job?" Tom says, "I went through the plant one day and I saw Kelly put something in the freezer. And I went over to him and I said, Kelly, why are you putting this rod and cylinder, this rod into the freezer?" And Kelly says, well, I couldn't fit this rod into the cylinder. So I thought, well, if I put the rod in the freezer, it'll shrink and the parts will fit together. And it did. And Tom looked at him and he says, that is amazing, what you've done, Kelly. And Tom again holds up the part to to the group and says, and remember while we're here, gang, no rejects, no rejects, no rejects. I think that story embodies everything one could do as a leader in a group to recognize individual contributions and also reinforce the sense of community in a group.
Yeah. That is a great example of this idea of encouraging the heart. And so there's another example of encouraging the heart that comes to mind that I know you have a connection with. So I wanted to bring that up. But we've mentioned on this podcast, I think at least on two different episodes, President John F. Kennedy. And probably a lot of our listeners may not be aware that you actually had a close up role in his inauguration. Can you share that story with us?
I'd be glad to. It's always something wonderful for me to talk about, brings back wonderful memories. I was an Eagle Scout as a young man, and I was selected. I still do not know why, but I was selected as an Eagle Scout to be part of John F. Kennedy's honor guard at the inauguration of Kennedy. And so on January 20th, 1961, on a below freezing day, I stood in front of the reviewing stand where it used to be. It's no longer, they no longer do it this way, but where it used to be on Pennsylvania Avenue, where the parade would go by the White House. And John Kennedy and his entourage and his beautiful wife, Jacqueline, were there along with other members of their family. And I got to stand there in the freezing cold and be part of that celebration. It was just an amazing, amazing experience for me, and it was. I identify that as the moment where I got personally inspired and encouraged to follow the dictum that in his speech at the Capitol building, an inaugural speech in which he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And I wanted to do something for my country ever since that moment in 1961. And so I decided the first step in that direction was after university. I joined the Peace Corps, and then I came back and did a couple of years of community-oriented work to be of service in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, in a real sense, he inspired, but I think also encouraged your heart, right, to greater
Yes.
things, which is really, I think, fundamental. That's, I think, what we're talking about here. What was it? Just, I mean, from a historical standpoint, and imagine it. You know, I've only seen videos and heard recordings and that, but what was it like to be there to really hear that? Something now that we hold as like probably the most famous inaugural address in our history. What was it like?
Yeah. Yeah, well, because I was in the honor guard at a different location than where the speech was actually given, I too saw it actually on TV in the staging area. So I never was standing at the Capitol building visiting it, but I can tell you that the vibe in the room and the vibe that day, particularly that particular moment, sent shivers down my spine and that of all the others who were standing there, brought tears to my eyes and motivated me. There's nothing like somebody reinforcing and 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 delivering a speech that moves people and reinforces values and beliefs that one has. It was an inspiring moment, and so I can still feel the cold from my feet up when I think about this moment. It was just something that has stayed with me since I was 15 years old.
Yeah. Well, that's spectacular. Just to be near, history like that is
Yeah,
incredible. So, well, thanks for sharing that. That I think that's wonderful. And again, I think it hits on this idea that we're talking about, of encouraging people's heart, and really
yeah.
fits well. Now that we kind of know what we're talking about with regard to encouraging the heart, what it means, can you share from your perspective why that is so important for leaders?
To quote a classic Broadway musical refrain, you got to have heart. All you really need is heart, miles and miles of heart. There's no bravery or boldness without heart. Richard the Lionhearted. There's no spirit or support without heart. There's no sacrifice or soul without heart. You got to have heart. And at the heart of leadership is caring. The word caring comes from the word cœur in French,
Mhm.
which means heart. So caring is about heart,
Yeah.
caring for the people, caring for the vision and values of the organization, caring for the community, caring for your colleagues is essential to leadership. And it has no purpose without caring. Leadership has fundamentally no purpose. If your heart isn't in something, and if your heart isn't with the people, without showing others that you care, they won't care about you, and they won't
Yeah.
care about the vision and values of the organization.
Yeah.
So leadership is a relationship, is a heart relationship fundamentally and definitionally. I think the first fundamental principle underlying leadership is that it's a relationship, and it's the quality of that relationship that determines the level of engagement that people will have. And the more leaders encourage others and recognize high performance, the higher the levels of engagement will be. So that's why it's important. It essentially increases engagement and fuels effort to perform at higher levels and give discretionary effort.
Yeah. You and I have talked before, and I talked about the model of leadership that I've developed with my work, and caring is one of those four major pillars.
Yeah,
And so the work that I've done coincides really well with what you all have done with that regard. Absolutely, caring is foundational when it comes to leadership and being an effective leader.
absolutely. And the evidence is there to support that finding in your work and in ours. Empirically, we find that there's significant support for the notion that leaders have higher performing teams and have more engaged people when they exhibit the behaviors associated with encouraging the heart.
And so, from that standpoint, this is kind of the zone where we usually talk about the scientific component of, the data that support whatever topic we're talking about. Fundamentally, and this is a little bit more philosophical than it is scientific, right? This question, but just thinking about what you were just saying, fundamentally, why is it, do you think, that encouraging the heart does result in better outcomes, higher productivity and innovation and those sorts of things?
Well, it really gets down to behaviors. When one behaves in a particular way towards someone else, it it has an impact, can have a positive or negative impact. And so when we recognize the performance of other people, just give you one example from our data, less than 1% say the organization values their work when leaders almost or rarely praise people for a job well done. In contrast, when 85%, according to our data, say the organization values their work when their leader, their direct leader, very frequently and almost always praises people for a job well done. So you can see in that data that praising other people has an impact
Mhm.
on other people. Similarly, 1% of people say that their work group has a strong sense of teamwork when leaders almost never or rarely publicly recognize people who exemplify the commitment to shared values. Whereas, again, 95%, 85% say they feel like their team has a sense of teamwork when their leader exemplifies a commitment to their shared values. And so, demonstrating as a leader that you share the values of an organization in your behavior to other people has an impact on them. It makes them more committed. So when leaders behave in certain ways that have a positive impact, we want to encourage that behavior. We want them to do more of that. So I could go through lots of data, Tom, from our 360 assessment, but the pattern is always the same. When you rarely or never do a particular behavior associated with encouraging the heart, such as recognize individuals publicly, tell a story about the things that they've done in an organization to contribute to the organization, people are more engaged. People are
Yeah.
more engaged when they see those behaviors and feel those behaviors from their leader. So why it's important? It's important because it increases performance and it increases engagement in an organization. But I think it's really more than that. At a human level, I mean, imagine going to any kind of performance, an athletic performance, a theatrical performance, watching your kids perform in a play at school, watching somebody at the Olympics. If everybody saw it in their sat on their hands and did nothing, had no reaction to what was going on, how do you think the athletes would feel? How do you think the kids on stage would feel? How do you think your employees feel when no one has any reaction to exemplary performance?
Yeah. Right.
It's
Dis
disengaging. It's
disheartening.
disheartening. So you want to let them know you appreciate their work because it makes them more enthusiastic. It makes them more committed to the organization. It fuels higher levels of performance.
Yeah, and I agree completely. I think it's vital that we encourage our people and that we tell them we appreciate them and be specific with regards to you did this thing and it was beneficial to our achieving our mission. Maybe overestimating, but I think almost everybody wants to feel appreciated. It's striking to me, though, that there are hordes of people in administrative roles and leadership positions who I think, despite the clear benefits, feel like it's not their role to care about their people, encourage their people, that sort of thing. Any hypothesis as to why folks would think that?
It's an interesting, very interesting question, and we give several explanations for that in our work. The first thing I want to do, before I directly answer that question, Thomas, let me just go
Yeah,
back to some of the behaviors,
sure.
and particularly like those that Tom Malone exhibited. Um, when we essentially look into the data and try to tease out of it some common themes of what people do when they're encouraging the heart. One of the things that's clear, for example, in Tom Malone's story that I told, at the very end, he says, and remember, gang, why we're here, no rejects, no rejects, no rejects. There's a clear set of standards.
Yeah.
Clear set of standards. It's not like we're rewarding and recognizing people just for showing up. It is for doing something that's consistent with values and beliefs.
Yeah.
Doing something to reinforce what's important in our culture at this organization. It's Tom Malone clearly enjoyed what he was doing. If you can see the video of this event, he's always smiling. People in the group are having a good time, but he's expecting people to perform at these high levels. Not you perform this way or else, but he believes that the people have the capacity to do that, and that's what he saw in Kelly when Kelly put that part in the freezer and came up with an idea to not even let one part go into the scrap bin. He had those high expectations, and he reinforced those expectations. He said, I was walking through the plant one day. He was paying attention. He was out walking around. He was looking consciously for people doing things right, not making mistakes, but
Mhm.
doing things right. He was paying attention. He personalized the recognition by telling the story about what Kelly did. He didn't say, "Oh, we have an award today. It's the Manufacturing Excellence Award. Kelly, come on up. Here's a check."
Yeah.
He personalized that by telling the story about Kelly and what Kelly did, individualizing it, making it special and more memorable. And he did it in a group. He celebrated together. He just didn't walk up to Kelly while he was alone by himself or call him into his office and give an award to him. He did it in front of a group. And by doing it in front of a group, you do a couple of things. You tell the group what the standard is. You remind them what the standard is. You show them an example of someone like them doing something again, so that they can kind of see, well, if I had a problem like that, I'd get inventive and try to do something to make sure that I lived up to no rejects, no rejects. And Tom did it himself. He set the example for other people, expecting them then to also recognize their peers when they do something that's exemplary and fulfilling the standards of the organization. So in teasing it apart, you have to ask yourself, how hard is this really?
Yeah.
I mean, can you be clear about the standards? Can you expect people have a high expectations of others and believe that others have the capacity? Can you pay attention, walk around the plant and look what's going on, walk around the office? I know in a virtual area, it's kind of difficult to do that sometimes, but you still have this technology that we're using here to make this possible. Can you personalize a story? Can you tell that story to other people? And so on, you go through each of the behaviors and say, how hard is this really? So why is it then back to your question? When we started our research on encouraging the heart, book, the first edition we were going to do in the 90s, we asked this very simple question. Do you perform, do you need, keyword need, do you need encouragement to perform at your best? And just about half of the people said they did need it. Well, that was kind of surprising to us because it was one of the things people said they did when they were at their best. But when you ask them, "Oh, do you need it?" People say, "No, I don't need it." It's as if, well, I'm capable. I have confidence in my own ability. I can do this. I don't need other people to tell me I did a good job to do a good job. So we changed the question. We said to people, well, if you get encouragement, does it help you? 97% of people said it did. I don't know about that 2 or 3% that says it doesn't.
Right.
They're robots, I guess. But the 97% of us answered yes. So there's something about not publicly saying, I really need encouragement, folks. I need you to encourage me to do, and when I do a good job, I need you to recognize me. We don't recognize the importance of that. But yes, we will admit that when we get it, it helps us. So we don't acknowledge how important encouraging the heart is. It's not one of those practices that often immediately pops to mind, particularly among senior executives. And people also say things like, well, they were just doing their job. Yeah, well, that's what Tom said. He was doing his job. But yet I want to make sure for that individual creative act that he did that really showed he went the extra mile. I want to make sure I point that out. Uh, and so you can, even if it's something small, and if you're out paying attention and you notice stuff, make sure you call it out and tell people this is an example of how we get high performance in the organization, how we get no rejects. Other people say I didn't have time, I wasn't paying attention. Well, if I recognize that person, then I got to recognize everybody else, as if recognition is a scarce resource. You know, uh,
Right.
saying thank you, it's a scarce resource, really. So
Yeah.
there are a number of explanations, but I think at the root of it is probably we just don't like to say out loud that we need encouragement to perform at higher levels. Look at athletes on the playing field, and when you watch a basketball game or a football game or a tennis match, look at how the audience gets excited when they do something and how the athletes perform. Uh, it's joyful. And so why not bring that to work?
Yeah. I think most people would like to work in an environment where there's joy and encouragement. So,
Yeah.
yeah, great question. Why not? Well, so you talked about Tom Malone as a good example of what it looks like to do well. Do you have the converse? Do you have sort of story that shows the negative consequences that result when a leader doesn't encourage the heart of those they lead?
Yes, and we always like to point out the positive examples, but in contrast, I remember Becky Morgan, colleague of ours, who was told us a story about one time when she was part of a professional association, and at the end of the conference that she helped plan, where she was the logistics chair, the people who worked on the committee were called up, she and the others, and Becky expected that at least the person recognizing her, calling her up and recognize her would say a few sentences about the 2 years she served on the committee, about the two cross-country flights she took, at her own expense for committee meetings, the hundreds of hours she put in, the hundreds of volunteers that she recruited. And what the president said was just two sentences. He said, "She'll never forget." He said, Rebecca did the little things. If no one else would do it, we knew Rebecca would. And not only did not feel appreciated, she felt diminished and demeaned.
Yeah.
It's like the guy couldn't take time to say a few more words about how I contributed. Said nothing, didn't personalize it, didn't didn't tell a story about it so that people would see the behaviors that were associated with why she was being called up in front of the group. So it didn't have the quality at all of what Tom Malone did, the example that I gave. It didn't have the ingredients of recognizing someone so that they'd feel more engaged, feel more motivated to perform at higher levels, feel recognized for their contributions.
Well, that's a great negative example to help us to see, and I think it leads into you've hit on these as we've been going along. I'm wondering if you could just kind of bullet point them, maybe for listeners, but for those that are wanting to take action, what are the practical steps they can implement to help them encourage the heart of those they lead?
Now, I like to think about little things like this. I mean, if you go again, let's go back to Tom Malone just as a good example. He was clear about the standards and the values. No rejects, no rejects, no rejects. High level of quality. Call it what you will. So whatever your values are, make sure you're clear about them. Make sure other people are clear about them, so that when you do see somebody do a behavior that's above and beyond, you can connect it to something that everyone shares, whether it's a goal, whether it's the vision of the organization, whether it's a set of values and beliefs, whether it's norms about how you behave in your organization, be able to connect the behavior to something that's cherished by other members of the organization. Take some time to make sure you're clear and others are clear. Expecting the best is an attitude, really. A way you can kind of do that is to make sure that you walk around the facility and see what messages are being communicated by posters on the wall. Are they communicating the right kind of expectation of people? Are they communicating positive images? When smile more often when you're out on the floor. I mean, it sounds kind of a woo woo, but yeah, if you have a frown on your face all day long, and you're generating a different kind of energy than if you're smiling, and if you're going around saying nice work, tell me about what you're doing here. Hey, I saw you do this. Tell me more about it. You're paying attention. So actively look for examples. Don't wait for somebody to come and tell you, oh, Kelly did something really great. Becky did something really terrific. Go out and look for yourself. Find examples. Make create a daily routine of recognition, meaning um, find ways to that you can collect some examples yourself of people doing exemplary behaviors that are consistent with values and beliefs. Personalize it. This is a unique story about this person. Tell the story so that it feels special to that individual, and do it as a group. You don't always have to do recognition as a group. There's sometimes when it's just one on one, and you don't skip saying thank you just because there's no one else around, but make sure that you find times to celebrate together. And I remember when I was the CEO and chairman of a small consulting firm, that we used to have a weekly Zebra Award, and the Zebra Award came from a poster that hung behind my desk in my office that was a rainbow striped zebra,
Hmm.
and above it, the saying was, "When you dream of good is not enough. When you dream of being great." And so someone else, and actually not me, in our office, decided that we would institute Zebra Awards for people who didn't do just good but did great. And so find a way that you can celebrate together, and make sure you do it personally. So those are kind of seven things you might think about: clarity of standards, expecting the best, paying attention, personalizing, telling the story, celebrating together, and setting an example.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for enumerating those, for our listeners. I think that's really helpful. I try to make sure that we cover a practical thing, and that you line those up wonderfully. Before we go, anything that you would say, if you could do one thing today to start encouraging people, uh, what would it be?
I would just make sure that at least 3 times a day, I thank some people in the organization. I would, set a simple goal for yourself. Just find ways in which you can say thank you to people. Put it all together with the ingredients I just described,
Mhm.
but start by simply finding ways to say thank you if you're not already. If you are already, we can all say thank you more often.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a simple step forward, 2 words, thank you, and then putting the other ingredients into it, uh, as you think about your leadership over time. And I guess I'd add one other thing, which is this is not a thing to do, but it's really uh, an attitude to have. It was taught to me by Major General John Stanford. John was head of Military Traffic Management Command when he was in the military, and I sat down and interviewed John very early in the first edition of the Leadership Challenge, our first book. Barry's in my first book, and I asked John if he would, after telling us his personal best leadership experience, give some advice to other leaders who were people who were trying to develop their leadership capacities, other leaders who were trying to get better at what they were doing. And he said, whenever anyone asks me that question, I tell people I have the secret to success in life. Well, I was really paying
You're
attention at that
leaning
point.
in.
I wanted to know the secret to success in life. And he said, the secret to success is stay in love. Staying in love gives you the fire to really ignite other people, see inside other people, to have a greater desire to get things done in other people. I don't know any other fire, any other thing in life that is more positive and exhilarating a feeling than love is.
Yeah.
And I did not expect to hear that from a major general, but yet that's what he said with his advice for others who wanted to develop themselves as leaders is to stay in love with the people you lead, stay in love with the mission, the vision, and the values, stay in love with those you serve, and stay in love with the role that you have as leadership. Whenever you fall out of love with any of those, you can't be as effective as a leader.
Yeah. Great wisdom. And I remember that quote from, it may have been from the Leadership Challenge, may have been from Encouraging the Heart. But I remember you all shared that in one of the books, certainly. And before that, I was reminded, basically you're saying be intentional, right? Go out there and look for people to say, hey, great job. Thank you for what you're doing, and so forth. And it reminded me of General Darren McDew,
Mm,
who was the commanding general of Air Materiel Command. He said that he told his staff, find people that I can thank. They're out there. People are always, doing things for which they should be thanked and acknowledged. Tell me about them so that I can thank them. And so he made that a point. That was a bearing that he had. And so I think that a big part of, if I look at those 7 concepts that you shared, so much of it is bearing. It's attitudinal, it's intentionality. Hey, look, do this, right? I'm going to make this a part of what I do. This is a part of who I am as a leader. I'm going to be a person who does my best to try to be encouraging. Doesn't mean you got to lie. And just as you've really hit on multiple times, no defects. It doesn't mean you don't hold people to standards, right? And it doesn't mean that you're not, it doesn't mean you're celebrating them for things that actually they should be doing just as part of their job, but it's those other things and power of that. I mean, I can think of times when I was encouraged to the point, just like the amount of energy and positivity that it infused in me to do even more, not because I was trying to seek that recognition, but because I knew that it was appreciated.
no. We as leaders have impact on others. You have an impact on others. I have an impact on others. And we need to take that seriously and ask ourselves, what
Absolutely.
kind of impact do I want to have?
Yeah.
Do I want to make people feel better about themselves, feel better about the organization? Do I want them to work harder and more effectively to accomplish the goals, to live up to the vision that we have as an organization? How do I want people to feel about this place? And then what are the behaviors that will create those kinds of feelings and actions on the part of others? And as you described in the general that you were referring to, just looking for people to thank is one of those behaviors.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been a great conversation. For those who are interested in learning more about encouraging the heart, look out for the updated version of Jim's book, Encouraging the Heart, which, according to the publisher's website, will be released on May the 6th. So I look forward to the new version of that because mine is, a former version. So I look for the updated one.
Thank
Jim, an honor and a privilege to have you as a guest on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me on the Science of Leadership.
you, Tom. It was a delight.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.